Hey everyone, happy Friday, happy Halloween. Hope you're having a good day. It's a beautiful day here in Atlanta. A little chilly this morning, but lots of good sunshine. I got out just a little bit. Definitely want some more, but hope you're all doing well. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a good way to handle mind escape. I like that. So we're talking through, we're going through a whole series this week and a little bit into next week called How Deconversion Changes Us. We could probably talk about that for a year if we wanted to, but we're not gonna. But we're just looking at some different aspects of it, and I think it's been really helpful to a lot of people. I've had a lot of good feedback. A lot of people have talked about how it's really just given them some things to think about, and so I really hope that it does. Hope it continues to help people. I definitely want this to be an encouragement, and don't have too many people in this live stream yet, so we're just going to give it a minute, and then we'll get started. And just remind everybody as well, and by the way, anyone that's not watching the live stream but the replay, thank you as well for checking in on what we're doing. And just remind everybody, I'm going to be sending out a sign-up sheet shortly for the Poetry Slam next Saturday. Love to have you on if you can. Be working on some poetry. It can be short, it can be long, it can be rhyming, it can be free verse, stream of consciousness, whatever comes to your mind. But if you're interested in sharing some of your poetry or lyrics, if you want to sing it, we'd love to have you. So again, we're going to talk through how deconversion from Christianity changes us, and we're picking just a few specific topics that go under that heading. And one of the things I want to talk about. Oh, hey, Stephen, great to see you. Thank you for joining us. And hey, accidentally agnostic. Thank you so much. Hope you're doing well too. Appreciate you being here today. And so we're talking through, again, how deconversion changes us. And we want to dive into the first topic, which is that it helps us to recognize what spiritual abuse is. And I'm going to put that on the banner for just a second. Oops, wrong one. Let's see here. It helps you recognize what spiritual abuse actually is. I think that's a good topic to take a few minutes to reflect on, because spiritual abuse really is a big part of this. And when I say spiritual, I'm not saying that I think that there's anything spiritual about Christianity or atheism, but it's certainly the way that they frame it is through spirituality. So it's a form of abuse. It's really psychological and emotional abuse, to be more accurate, but we'll call it spiritual abuse for today. So again, it helps you finally recognize it, and you also get to recognize how normalized it was in your church experience. A lot of us were taught that discipline, like church discipline or just general discipline in any kind of context where the Lord's being part of the discussion, that's really a form of love. And even if it's God doing it, where he's making you suffer, that's part of the way that he refines you. The refiner's fire, taking away the dross, part of your sanctification. And of course, dying to yourself was the ultimate goal, to be partaking of Christ's crucifixion in a sense, for your own pride, your own arrogance, your own sin. And for a lot of us, if we felt exhausted, we kind of felt like we were doing it right. And maybe even like a numbness to the world. I don't feel that attracted by the sins of the world anymore. That numbness was like a fruit of the Spirit. You're kind of maturing, but there are patterns that you pick up on. And we're going to talk through some of them. Certainly they would include things like manipulation and coercion and control. And a lot of us really did think that we were in a scenario, in a community where we were being spiritually matured, spiritually growing. But now on this side of it, we see that a lot of it was just trauma. And we talked a lot about that yesterday with our nervous system, sort of, trying to respond to that and flinch and all that. But this became great to see you. Thank you so much. No worries. I appreciate you watching the replays too. That's awesome. Thank you so much. But we had, in a sense, the perfect storm of codependency and control. And it's a pretty cruel trick how spiritual abuse never really looks like abuse when you're in it, at least for a lot of us. It might look like accountability. Again, it would sound like love. It certainly has lots of messages of love and grace, and we're speaking the truth in love. Maybe the verbiage of like, this is godly correction, and God has authority, the pastor has authority, and everything just felt like it was part of the way that this worked. And a lot of it was priming us to have this learned helplessness, where it's not just futile to resist. It's not just futile to resist, to quote the Borg, but it's really sinful. It's sinful to resist any of this kind of correction from God and from the church. And when you grow up in that atmosphere, it's very, very normalized. And we hear verses like, God disciplines those he loves. Obedience is better than sacrifice. Take up your cross daily. Suffering is going to produce perseverance and endurance. And you must decrease so that he can increase. And that basically, if you want to translate it, is if you're hurting in church, good, you're doing it right. And so when you felt like somebody was preaching from the pulpit, whether they were actually preaching directly at you, and I've heard some stories where people literally, you can tell the preacher is preaching at you. I've never seen that myself, but I've heard enough stories to know it does happen. But even when you just sense that this sermon really is about me, I know it in my head that God is using this to convict me. You assume you deserve it. You assume that you deserve the correction, the pullback. And when someone manipulates you that way, it's a good thing when you're in it. You feel like to be humble and say, I'm going to accept the correction that I deserve. And even when they're getting really, really close to or actually violating your boundaries, it's all part of the discipleship process. And you might even have a sense that your instincts inside are screaming and protesting, but that can be chalked up a lot to spiritual warfare. The enemy is attacking you. The enemy is attacking the community, the oneness of our church. And a lot of us, we didn't consider at all that it might just be us waking up. And that's what psychological captivity looks like. You're loyal to the system, and that far outweighs your loyalty to your own safety. And again, you're learning to equate abuse with your spiritual formation. And it's really hard to recover from that. That's a lot of gaslighting. And we're just obviously touching the tip of the iceberg here. But when you're sitting there in the church and in your pew every Sunday, perhaps a couple more times during the week, your pain really is seen as a path to holiness. And you being broken is a good thing in that context. And it's not, you don't listen to the trauma. And that's how, like we said last night, that's how Stockholm syndrome settles in. The abused eventually defend their abuser because our identity collectively depends on that abuser being a good person, whether you're talking about the pastor or Yahweh. And when you leave the church, when you leave Christianity, these symptoms do start to catch up with us. A lot of people might have difficulty making decisions without some sense of guilt. Some sense of guilt because you're thinking, did I seek God's face enough? Am I doing this in the flesh versus letting him guide me? And even, again, that that's not real, but you for years have not made your own decisions. You have squashed your voice to make sure there's plenty of room for God's voice to dominate. And maybe some of us have anxiety when we assert ourselves. We feel like I should be very humble, should be very meek and very quiet, very reserved to let those that God has put in authority take that authority and speak with authority, but also just to let God dominate the conversation. We also, I think, in that same vein, we have a lot of people that talk about sort of this chronic people pleasing. It's like we're very careful about it. We're very polished. But when you break it down, really, it's like you say you have a servant's heart, but this is just about people pleasing. You've been trained that way. People pleasing is a way that you get to earn your points in this system, in the community. Some people, I know, I had this a little bit, but some people even talk about panic attacks in church, which is a really weird thing in some ways, because you think this is supposed to be the safest place ever. Again, I didn't have it quite to that extent. I wouldn't have used that verbiage myself, but I've talked to people who've talked a bit about it. But the worship music can really set you on fire in different ways, especially when you feel like the worship music is creating this atmosphere of closeness to God, and you don't feel it. You feel like you're the prodigal son or the prodigal daughter, and you're like, we have all this closeness. This, it smells like a spiritual hug that God's giving us through the worship music. And when you don't feel that, you feel like, what's wrong with me? And you might have even flashbacks to some of the talks, some of the sermons, certainly purity uh, culture talks, maybe the altar calls, the sermons on deliverance, breaking the chains. And it just, the flashbacks are real because you know that when you were in those moments, you wanted to feel convicted, but you often didn't, and you didn't know what was wrong or if you were being sinful. And you set yourself up in this spiritual abuse context to constantly second guess yourself, to constantly kind of hate yourself for not being enough, for not being in the right frame of mind to honor the Lord. And you have this, of course, deep-seated fear at all times that you're always being watched and judged by God, and certainly perhaps even the pastors, your spiritual leaders, your mentors, they're watching you and basically saying the same thing, like, you're not enough, you're not pure enough or holy enough or on fire enough. And we know from the book of Revelation, God likes to spew those people out of his mouth, and you're like, whoa, I'm in the hot seat here, I'm in danger. And your intrusive thoughts say, you're rebelling, aren't you? And you're not. You may be doing nothing of the sort. You're just being human. And so you have these fears when you're in it, and these flashbacks when you're out of it. It's your body reacting to your thoughts, trying to catch up with what you're slowly evolving towards. And your hypervigilance while you're in it becomes your new normal. You're scanning the room for spiritual threats. I remember some people telling me, even this wasn't my experience, but some people said that they would really be afraid to go to thrift stores because they would be afraid that maybe something that they would want to buy might have been in a demonic home. And so they'd be like, that pot, that's so beautiful, I want to buy it for $3 here at the thrift store. That might have been in a home that had all kinds of demonic activity in it. So what do? And of course, you don't get it because you're trying to stay careful. And so all these things, this abuse of your mind, of your sensitivities, of your vigilance. And for a lot of us, if we were really, again, in it, like deeply in it, profoundly in it, whereas like this was everything to us, there was this level of maturity, like this unshakable belief level that you often get to, where you almost feel like human joy is selfish, and that resting is kind of a form of not being excited enough about the gospel, or even a mild form of rebellion. But I've talked about this before for me, where I struggled before, and I still struggle to this day with resting, because I felt for so long like it is just not fair that I might be watching a show, I'm watching some comedy show and laughing, and literally the neighbor next door is 3 days away from a heart attack that they don't know about it's coming, but it's going to take them out. Why wouldn't you work your tail off to do whatever you could to share the gospel, to live it and to speak it so that they can be saved? Are you that selfish? And so rest became a form of not as much rebellion for me, but just a form of extreme laziness. And I still to this day struggle with it. And you're having boundaries, and you're having self-care times was basically a liability to the advancement of the kingdom. And there's so much, like you really, you look at it from all the angles, and you put it together in this picture, and you really examine it under a microscope, and it's crazy. But if I can put it this way, you end up feeling bad for feeling bad. Do you ever think about it that way? You feel bad for feeling bad, because you're told all this stuff is for good, all the work super hard for the kingdom, for God, and this is what love does. Love expends itself. Love is going to do everything it can to go to the ends of the earth to share the gospel, to live the gospel. Your pain is about growth. And so if you had any sense in you of saying, I don't like this, this stinks, this is painful, I don't want to go through this, God, any of that, you were basically saying, I feel bad about this situation, I feel bad about the way my life's going. But then the theology kicks in, and you begin to feel bad for feeling bad. You red flags were your crosses to bear. Your theology was very trauma informed in the sense of inflicting it. And if it hurt, it felt like that's good. You must be getting closer to God. I mean, that's like what the instruction manual says, right? And First Peter, I think, talks about after you've suffered for a little while, the Lord will strengthen and establish and settle you. But again, it's all different now. That's the point of where we're going to. How it changes is that we call it for what it is. These are control tactics. This is emotional domination. It's certainly a form of grooming on a systemic level. It's gaslighting on a very theological level at first, but really psychological. This is a theater show. This is everybody wondering if you're going to play your part so that they can clap for you. And it's really you have a conscience inside of you that they have weaponized. They've turned it into a knife against you, like a scalpel for you to cut off your own part of your own humanness. And this indoctrination, these levels of it, you get so deep, and so the roots go so deep, and you get so refined that they basically have convinced you that their abuse is part of your character development. And that's where when you finally see that for what it is, you have at least a shot at healing. Spiritual abuse is real. It's not just something that happens in these extreme cults, though it certainly does, but it happens in regular old mainstream churches that no one calls a cult for the most part. It happens in youth groups and Bible studies and small group studies and family devotionals. Anywhere that power is claimed in the name of God and then used to dominate someone instead of to lift them up. Anywhere that somebody with a Bible and an agenda gets to corral you and make you their captive audience. Anywhere that your obedience is like a tithe, that's control. That's manipulation. Your doubt or lack of assent becomes a form of betrayal. And these leaders, charismatic or not, they learn various ways, the mechanics of trauma bonding. And they frame it in a way that you think, this is my discipleship. This is what it means to follow God. This is what it means to be a disciple of Christ. And freedom on this side of it is so different. It's no longer about, will you please submit? It's more like, I'm allowed to ask my hard questions. We talked a lot about this yesterday. I'm allowed to ask the hard questions. I don't owe anybody my shrinking down and being silent. I don't have to submit. My body belongs to me. I can leave if I have to. I don't have to hurt and bleed, metaphorically, to be believed that this is really hurting my experience, my life. I hope you know, a lot of you have been a theological punching bag for a long time. I mean, a real long time. You have been a theological, psychological, emotional punching bag for a lot of people. And they can call it what they want. They can call it part of the authority of the church. But your nervous system hasn't been lying to you. It's been trying to alert you to what you maybe didn't have the words to say. And so as we begin to reconstruct ourselves and create a safe place in our minds and our hearts, it's a place where no one else holds those keys. You have the power, but you have to take it. But you realize your worth is not connected to your performance, and it's certainly not connected to how much you suffer or get close to it. And when your inner compass starts to point towards these things and starts to point towards true autonomy and the ways that you need to have peace in your life, and your attachment to the truth, or at least to your search for the truth, doesn't require you to disassociate and disattach from yourself, and your questions are completely normal and acceptable, and this love that we thought was from God is not weaponized at all. And the fear that we talked so much about yesterday, fear isn't shaping your life and steering your decisions. That's where you have the chance for the first time. Your healing is not going to be linear. It's going to have some ups and downs and wiggles, but at least it's yours. It's yours to own. And the symptoms of these sort of PTSD experiences, they're not weaknesses. They're just evidence that you have survived. And you begin to realize that spiritual abuse isn't throwing away your spirituality. And I don't use the term spirituality much for my life, but some people find that helpful to still call themselves spiritual people, to pursue a form of spirituality. And for those that do, it's fine to do that. Obviously, it's your path. But acknowledging that you've been spiritually abused and moving away from that, protecting yourself, doesn't mean that you're not spiritual, if you want to say it that way. You're rescuing yourself from someone who hijacked your spirituality. They stole your soul, if you want to say it that way. I don't think we have a soul, but if you use, again, we're using a lot of metaphors, but in our old verbiage, but they stole your soul, and you're like, I want it back. And I'm taking the how they will like take a stamp and put it on wood to say this was made in this wood shop, or they'll stamp a cow or something, or clamp their, you're like, you've been stamped, and you're saying, I want that stamp removed. I want the chains removed. I want to end this whole performance play. Like, I'm not looking here to go through the motions anymore. I want my own voice back. And for a lot of us, I think we'd say our voice has been very deeply buried for a long time. And if they really loved us, they wouldn't have treated us that way. And God, for sure, if he was real, would not have needed to terrorize and manipulate you and get you to go through so much suffering. But I think about people like Job, and I think about Abraham, where even though he didn't have to, in the end, kill his son, at least in the edited version of the story we got, but he didn't have to kill his son in the end. But he was, for the majority of the story, forced to say to God, I will kill my son. God wouldn't terrorize you to prove your loyalty to him. And that's a big piece of this. A lot of us are going to have to look through our time in Christianity and figure out that we did not have any chance of having our dignity intact. We really did, because they stole it from us. And when you begin to take your power back and you bring things into the light, and when you bring things in the light, they often lose their power. You are going through a beautiful experience of taking your own life back, and you're getting free from the people that claim to save you. They weren't saving you, but it's our turn to save ourselves. And as we like to joke, it's our time to be born again. Well, I'm going to talk about that whole topic again. That's a lot of these topics. I feel like I'm giving them a 5 or 10 minute discussion here, but I'm like, let's expand that one someday. So some of these, they're going to certainly fall in that category. But let's go through a few quick comments. Helen, great to see you. I was made to chalk all my thrift store purchases on the bonfire, as regifting them would lead others astray. Yeah, it's amazing, some of the stuff that you read about, some of the ways that these, especially the more charismatic groups, did it. It's very sad, the manipulation that occurred. And as far as I'm concerned now, all of Christianity is a cult and fits the dictionary definition to a T. Yeah, definitely agree with that. Victor says, I feel like that too when I rest. I feel so guilty, like I shouldn't, or anything I do for myself. Yeah. And that's it feels like so powerful, in a sense. I'm knocking things off my to-do list, and I'm accomplishing things, and people are so appreciative of what I do. And it's like, yeah, there's a side to that, but at the end of the day, if you feel guilty the moment that you rest, that's part of the trauma. That's really part of the trauma. Well, let me go into the second section. I'm going to do three sections here. And this one I'm going to put up on the banner for a moment. And it awakens, deconversion awakens a fierce empathy for those who were still trapped inside the system, trapped inside of Christianity. A lot of us still have people that we love or we know that are stuck in this. And it is an ongoing, almost daily, hourly battle to not be discouraged. We don't mock them. We do remember being them. We remember the tears at the altar. We remember all the late night prayers that they're probably still doing. We remember the fear of hell and the hope of heaven. We remember the joy of surrender, surrender to God and his will. We remember the pride. We would have called it humility at the time, but the pride of being certain, that sort of comforting hypnosis of thinking that everything is sacred and God's doing a great story with your life. But we have this different kind of ache now, don't we? Once we escape, we realize that we're now sort of condemned to watch people that we love be devoured by this same machine that we escaped from. And it's the machine of mercy and grace and salvation, but it's basically was really a factory of conformity. and lots of beauty at times, beautiful stained glass, beautiful sounding songs, but it's really just a machine. And again, I'm going to go back to some of these metaphors a lot, but this was a trauma bonding theater of oppression, and you were in a machine. There's a weird ache that happens when you wake up and realize that that's what's happening and may happen for the rest of their lives. And the ache isn't just what you lost in terms of your time and your perspective, your worldview, but the reality that you have to, in a sense, leave people behind. We would, if we were in a war, like a physical war, we would kind of promise each other, like, I will never leave you behind. If you get stuck somewhere, I'm not, and I know that, if I don't fight for you, that you're pretty much a goner. I will never do that to you. I would rather be a goner too. I would rather take the risk and fight for you and fight with you to get you to escape from the dangerous position you're in. But escaping from Christianity doesn't work that way, because they don't want to be rescued. And those people, they're still completely linked and chained and tethered to a hope that is harming them. And they've got all these shackles all over their worldview, all over their mind, and they're smiling about it and quite happy and wishing you would join them. They're in these loops of trauma, and to them, it's just worship. And they have these illusions that are very, very beautiful to them. But to you, it's like, this is just an illusion. And you see them, you either see them physically, or you actually, or if you go, but you at least know where they're at. You see them sitting in the pews. You see them raising their hands, and you see them crying to be broken by the Lord. You see them defending these doctrines and still taking the communion wine and the communion bread, and just swallowing guilt down. I'm so guilty. I'm so bad. God, please use this table, this Eucharist, to cleanse me and keep me focused on you. They're still clapping away, clapping over their own captivity. They're gaslighting themselves for the sake of the relationship with this supposed God. It's a prison. These are elegant, inherited delusions. And it's not funny. It's horrible. It's so familiar to us because we were in it. But, eyes closed, hands lifted, heart aching. This is the joy of the Lord. We are numb, but we are obedient. We are devoted, but we're disassociating. And we are longing for peace in the context of a theology that just wants to guilt trip us and punish us. You remember what it was like to weep and ache over the lost. Say, God, please let me have a ministry that will allow me to take the gospel to those who don't have it or who don't understand. God, I pray for the prodigal. I believe that doubt is an attack from the enemy. And God, you are testing my faith, but I am resolved. I will be faithful to the end. And you and I misinterpreted all these trauma symptoms as spiritual failings or spiritual limitations. And we had so many convictions. And we knew the choreography of this so well. We could dance it blindfolded, upside down, backwards. We performed it so well. This was a well-rehearsed play. We remember, the guilt of not doing something. I remember so many times, if you didn't read your Bible enough on a given day, you should feel guilty. I remember many discussions where people would say, that person is having a bad day, and I know why they're having a bad day, because they probably didn't have their quiet time or their devotional time with the Lord. So much pressure to just smile and do it, and so much fear of sinning, especially like if you let your sin kind of linger for a while, and some people have this weird thing of like, I can't sin and not confess it before I die. Like I have to die in a good state of, where my confession has happened. But so much confusion that we had. Why does God feel so far away if I think I'm doing everything right? But this cognitive dissonance is all over the place, and they might even be quietly unraveling inside on some level, but they get pulled in, because they're going to always misdiagnose this as spiritual warfare. They're going to always say this is part of the holy wrestling of letting God take over. And you and I remember how comforting it was to be in that, to say, I've got the answers. The Bible's the answers, and the Spirit's inside of me giving me the answers. And we outsourced our agency to the church and to the pastor so much. We let someone else do our thinking for us, and we thought it was for our own good. and autonomy was essentially forbidden, and we didn't really want it. We didn't want to be in charge. We wanted God to take the wheel. That cliche, Jesus take the wheel. The system that we were in thrived on all of us having a learned dependency that created this reflexive compliance. Just says you will do this, and you will like it, and you will want to do it, and you will do it when we're not even looking. You'll police yourself. And we remember just the intoxicating feeling of thinking we're part of this big story, but we're also part of the chosen, especially if you were stuck in Calvinism like I was. You're part of the chosen. And when you get that big of a head and you think God has specially picked me, he's put me in the Lamb's Book of Life, your identity gets so deeply embedded. Again, nothing you originally wrote. You didn't write this narrative. You didn't put this thing together, but you're stuck in it now. And you're told to live for it and be willing to die for it. And if you're willing to obey, then basically you're on the path to sainthood of sorts. And your worth is measured by how much you fall in line. These, again, are classic trauma responses that we label as our devotion to the Lord. And when you see your loved ones still in it, defending it, teaching it to kids, shaming themselves, never feeling good enough, always feeling like they have to jump through more hoops to obey God. We don't feel superior on this side. We are glad to be out, but we're not superior. It took me 43 years to get out. There's nothing superior about being the sucker in the room for 43 years. But you feel grief, like intense grief, like it has a surgical edge that's just laced with the irony of, you were in the prison that you used to think of as the promised land, and then you realized it's not that, and you escaped, but your friends and your loved ones are still in it. You know how long it can take for anyone to wake up and ask hard questions. And you have grief because and I know that a lot of our friends and our loved ones will not ask those questions. I'm working on a presentation that's based on a recent interview I did where the gentleman I spoke with, Colton, he was talking about his podcast, which is something like the next question or ask the next question. And I was thinking in that interview with him about how a lot of deconversion can really get kickstarted pretty intensely by simply one good question. And so I'm writing down a whole list of that one good question. It's hundreds of them. But if you ask any one of them really seriously, and certainly if you ask dozens of them very seriously, then you're going to probably say, this doesn't add up like I thought it did. But you have the grief because you know that they are so indoctrinated and so brainwashed and so stuck behind their bars and then thinking it's, heaven on earth, that they're not going to ask any of those questions, not seriously. And you realize that there are dynamics here that are long-term, that this kind of trauma and this kind of willingness to give up your whole life for Jesus is intergenerational. It's reinforced with like a sacred language. Like we want to have a home that lives for Jesus today, but we want to have a heritage. We want to have this long, I want to raise kids to love the Lord, and I want them to be strong in the Lord and raise their kids for the Lord. And like by the choices you make today for your kids will affect 3, 4, 5 generations down because you stood up for what was good and right and godly. These sort of long-term intergenerational traumas that we've been part of, it's just like, wow, I can't believe that this could be not just my own loved ones today who are never going to escape, but they could be putting generations after me in this Bible prison. And we know that, again, we got to go to the matrix. Some people are not ready to escape. They're not ready to be unplugged. And some people just, if they can't see it, they can't see it. And for a lot of people, what it would take to be ready to escape is a form of rebellion and backsliding. So, they're going to have the threats of hell or lack of community and closeness or sort of any kind of spiritual shunning, these isolation tactics that are so classic. They're weaponizing all of it. But, in the midst of all that grief, and that's, we could go on about that for quite a while, I think, but unpack it. But there are other things that I think of when I think about this topic. And there's a part of it that I would say is almost surprisingly strong, and that is the empathy. Again, not the soft, squishy kind, but like the scarred and bruised kind. You and I have been forged in a fire. And this is a kind of empathy that burns very clean. It doesn't need to fix people or debate them or convert them. It just sits back and watches and sees. We see them without an agenda. We see beneath their surface level certainty. We see right through the doctrine. We see right through the theology and the worldview and the culture. We see their fear of abandonment that's driving them, even if they can't say that, even if they don't know that's there. We see their fear of abandonment. We see their fear of punishment, either in this life or the one to come. We see their fear of thinking freely. We see all of it, and it's a form of terror. And we see they're basically in a fight or flight mode, frozen into submission. And we see their spiritualized responses. We see their praise to all this, and it's just another form of disassociation. And you see the longing. You hear in these songs, especially some of the newer worship songs, these aches and pains of saying, God, show up. God, I'm hurting so much. Please restore what the years the locusts have eaten. Give me the desires of my heart. I think songs many years ago, were much more doctrinally intense and a lot less about like how I feel and more about, do you assent to the correct truths of the faith? But people have given themselves the freedom to really deeply feel. And in doing so, when you see that, I see what you want. I see what you're aching for. You're longing for rest. You're longing for freedom. You're longing to feel like you're enough. You're looking for a love that doesn't have any kind of performance metrics. And, when they talk about you, and you're going to be chalked up as deceived and lost and perhaps arrogant, dangerous, you don't lash out. I don't lash out. We just sit back and remember with a little bit of a tear in our eyes. We remember the scripts that we used and memorized to survive. We remember how this was basically the gateway drug to heaven, and questioning, of course, was the gateway drug to hell. But being in the opiate of the masses, we were stuck in it. This was the gateway drug to just some beautiful things, to the heaven and to the face of God, to eternity. Once upon a time, we would have said the same thing about other people that they now say about us. And we would have had a very passive aggressive, concerned look and prayer request. That's how the system polices itself. The wounded become the enforcers, and that we all thought it was holy. We become the regulators, and we walk carefully. But on this side of it, we admit we love our loved ones fiercely. And we're not going to get invited much to talk. We know that. We will speak when invited. But we know that our awakening cannot and should not be weaponized. And our healing doesn't deserve a smug look from them, a smirk and a snarky sarcasm. But we're not going to return that favor. We're not going to be snarky back. We're going to plant seeds, knowing that we have to lower our expectations that those seeds may never sprout. But empathy is not weakness, certainly not sin, as is the cliche of the day. But empathy is what happens when you've been to the bottom of the system and you've come back and figured out a way to put the pieces back together. You've walked barefoot through the theological glass, and you could blame everybody that put that glass down and cut your feet, or you can just start to offer bandages and offer a way to help. You and I have been to the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, of the worldview life. We have been at the floor of that barrel where it's such desperation, and we've found a way out. And instead of it making us cold and callous and angry, it's led us to so much compassion. And I hear that from so many people in the interviews. So much compassion for the people still stuck in it. Trauma deconstructs our minds and our spirits. And when we get to the point of reconstructing ourselves with truth, it's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful place to be. And some people in this mix of all these people that we think they'll never wake up, they're so entrenched. Some of them will wake up someday, and some of them will someday need someone like you to talk to. And if and when that day ever comes, we're not going to be holding a verse like they did for us, but we'll be holding space for them. We're not going to demand that they agree with everything. They don't have to be agnostics or atheists, but we're going to give them space it's going to say, you don't have to convert to my way of thinking. This isn't another form of fundamentalism. I just want to help you heal. And we're ready, in a sense, to witness, not like we did before as Christians. We're certainly not preaching to them, but we're ready to listen. We're ready to have that quiet conversation and just say, tell me about your journey. How are things going? And, one of the best parts of this might be that you are becoming, for them, at least in theory, the person that you needed. And you're doing that for someone that's not ready for it yet, which is weird. But you needed someone to walk beside you when you deconverted. And for a lot of us, that was not an option. And you walked it alone, and that stunk. I know for sure this very, very much, that was true of my life for quite a few aspects of my deconversion. It was a lonely, painful road. And you needed someone to be right there with you. And yet you can use this time to prepare yourself to say, when the time comes that they need me, I'll be there. And I won't be snarky. I won't be judgmental. I won't be passive aggressive. I won't be like, I told you so. I told you this was mythology. I told you your worldview is bonkers. No, like, we'll just say, I understand how painful this is for you. And if you want to talk about it, I'm here for you. That's an amazing, amazing gift. Hold it tight to your heart. But when the time comes for our loved ones to say they need us, be ready. Be ready. I'm going to go to a few comments here, and then we'll go into the last section for today. Helen says, I'm still a new deconverted person, and I'm sorry, but have not got to this stage yet. I'm still very angry at them. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. It's a journey, and definitely we can't rush it. It's going to take time. So I do wish you well with the next few steps. Stephen says, after 6 years of shunning, my ex-bishop tried to get me to come back. Actions speak louder than words. Yeah. It's really sad. It's really sad what they do. Helen, it's interesting that you were talking about anger, because that's actually what I'm going to wrap up with today. This last section for today is that deconversion gives you back your anger and teaches you how to use it wisely. Gives you back your anger and teaches you how to use it wisely. Again, this is going to be the last section for today, but I'll be on again later tonight. Fingers crossed. I'm aiming for 5 p.m. Eastern, so I would love to see you all one last time today if you have the bandwidth. But anger was demonized, wasn't it? Anger in Christianity is, God says straight up, like, the wrath of man does not bring about the righteousness of God. You have to be slow to anger. You have to forgive endlessly and turn the other cheek. And it takes deconversion for us to understand that anger isn't a sin. Anger is part of just the information that's in our head. It's part of our natural response. It's the fire of your boundaries saying, I am going to take this seriously. I'm going to come back to life. I'm going to put my foot down. And that's hard, though. It's hard to go through this, because for so many of us, that was a very forbidden feeling. It was very unspiritual and immature, very worldly, very selfish, very dangerous. This was it wasn't a fleshly indulgence in the sense of sexuality, but it was kind of a fleshly indulgence. They certainly never gave you the words like, this is a psychological signal of injustice that you're naturally responding to. And they certainly never mentioned that if you suppress your anger, that's where the resentment is going to grow. They might have said it in one sense, but never really explained how it works in the truest sense, because they would kind of say, deal with it before you start to resent someone. But the dealing with it basically meant do not get angry. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Again, turn the other cheek, forgive 70 times 7. And your anger, and certainly your rage, it had like these real strong boundaries. And you basically had to apologize. I felt this way. I had to apologize nonstop before you even understood what happened or understood your own pain. It's like somebody gets in your way and bumps you, and you have to apologize for them bumping you. Like, oh, I'm sorry. And I think some of us still do that. It's just part of our personalities now. But when we had that heat rising inside of us, like, oh, this is making me so upset, we had to pray it away. And our nervous system, the part of our nervous system that was angry, that was like seen as another form of rebellion. And you have to squash it or it's going to get you. And we'd hear stories from the Bible of different people that let their anger get the better of them, and we'd see their lives kind of fell apart. And so when someone mistreated us or abused us, ignored us, manipulated us, whatever, you're not supposed to get mad. You're supposed to get humble and submissive and godly and smile through it. Praise through the violation. Call it long suffering, but that's not what it was. This was them putting you in a mental cage. It's all part of the system. It's all part of the cage. I mean, we're going to go back to these concepts over and over. Something was done to us and we were tricked and we were in a cage for our minds. And on this side of it, when you first let your anger return and it feels sort of fierce and primal and raw and like almost, again, dangerous, but definitely undeniable, this dam is breaking inside of you and you feel it in your bones. And you might even be just literally angry at what was done to you, like the stuff we're talking about here. Like, I'm so angry at what they did to me in God's name. These teachings robbed you of years of joy. They robbed you of basic information that you deserved. And they robbed you of you holding leaders accountable. You just were supposed to obey them no matter what. This system taught you to be very silent and submissive. And for a while, that was the only form of safety, but now you realize there should have been a completely different kind of safety. And it's so upsetting to realize they didn't tell us the truth and they really were manipulating us. It's very disorienting because you're no longer pushing all that emotion down. You're letting it rise. You're trying to be healthy, but you're letting it burn in some sense, and you're learning to speak the language of anger that we've talked a lot about. A lot of this is a new language. It's a new lexicon. But your anger was trying to tell the truth. That's what this was about. Your anger was saying, there are some truths here that we're in this church we're ignoring. And your anger was the expert saying, no, come on, don't stop. Don't push it away. You got to focus on the truth. You got to bring it into the light. And they basically kept on saying, no. Your anger is not that. It's a bad thing. Which is also ironic because, God has wrath and God is so angry, but it was like, well, he's allowed to be. He's the only one. The only exception, he can have anger and be righteous, but for us, pretty much, it's not really. Our humanity is always going to mess it up. Our righteous anger will always end up being very unrighteous very quickly. But anger is not the enemy. It's the alarm system, just saying something's wrong here. Something matters here. Something's violated me. Something needs to change. And again, your voice was trying to say it out loud. Your theology said, don't say it. But now this is this new pulse in our veins, waking us up, and our voices is cracking through the decades of this forced peace, like just for the sake of the peace of the community, keep it calm. And it shatters when you deconvert. Anger doesn't always look pretty, and I'm not recommending you all do express your anger in any other way other than talking through it very healthily. But anger inside of you, just facing it, no matter what happens next. When you're angry, it's messy. It can be overwhelming. And you're feeling stuff deeply that you maybe didn't let yourself feel. But now on the side of deconversion, that doesn't make it evil or wrong. Because underneath all this fire and this intensity, there's a clarity that you're trying to aim for. And underneath this rage, there's this list of things that were done that were unjust, and these wounds that never got the justice they deserved. And in these dynamics of anger, there is information, there is raw data that needs to be processed, and your emotional intelligence is there. Anger is a trauma response that is saying, I want this to be fixed and made right. I want to have my personhood and my autonomy reclaimed and respected. You don't get to treat me like that anymore. I deserve better today. I deserved better then. I can see through your manipulation, and I'm worth protecting. That was not love, and I know the difference now. I'm not going to give away my sanity for your comfort. And the more that you talk through and sort of welcome that anger the more you learn to channel it into, the more you learn to channel it into trying to achieve justice and trying to achieve truth telling, you might sort of push it the direction of more like art. Maybe you're writing some kind of poetry about it. You're certainly going to move it towards boundary setting and into self-respect and insisting other people respect you as well. Your anger is saying, I want to be free to advocate for myself. When your anger and your rage is healthily used and harnessed, it is basically it's like an engine moving the car of your life forward towards an evolved life where you get to have your autonomy back. Anger is your ally. It's not something to be ashamed of. A lot of us arguably were doormats in Christianity on a lot of levels, very much doormats. And we felt like we had to just be endlessly available and endlessly nice. But that kind of niceness is not a virtue because it costs you yourself. It costs you your voice. And we're not willing to be suppressed anymore. We're not willing to say, yes, serenity is important, but I'm not going to create and advocate for serenity if it's going to basically make me feel like I'm in a hostage situation. I don't want any more of this Stockholm syndrome. I want to let my anger burn cleanly, but I want to let it burn. I want to get to the clarity that it's trying to move me towards, into the courage and the power. I want to stop whispering and let myself roar if necessary. When you stop being afraid of your anger and you stop being afraid of your own voice and your voice that you feared before, we feared so much about ourselves. We feared our anger, we feared our sexuality, we feared our stray thoughts. But your voice with this clarity, it's basically becoming your compass. It's becoming your fierce, powerful compass. And we're not pointing it towards vengeance, but we're pointing it toward alignment and toward wholeness. And we're certainly saying, I'm no longer going to live my life as if I'm apologizing for existing or apologizing for disagreeing. And I think that's where the healing has at least a chance to start. We stop apologizing for our fire. And that's where the theologian voice that's in us, in the back of our heads, perhaps the theologian, the Christian worldview part of us, we wish we could just say, I'm done with it. But that voice that's still there. That's when that part starts to die down and the human, the self inside of you starts to stand up and say, I'm not going to take a backseat anymore. I'm done living in the shadows. My anger has a place. I need to deal with it healthily, but my anger has a place. And you all stole a lot from me. And you all lied to me. You all tricked me. You deceived me. You abused me. And I will call it what it is. And I will wish you the best. I will wish you healing too, because you inherited the trickery. They tricked you, and you in turn tricked me. But to say, at this point, we need to stop. Let's draw a line in the sand. The cultural dynamics of these generational beliefs that just get passed on over and over and over. We need to draw a line in the sand and say, I'm no longer going to accept being treated this way. I'm no longer going to pass it on to other people. Your anger is driving you to healthiness. So I encourage you to think through it, talk through it with the right people, but don't feel like you got to live in the shadows. If you feel enraged about what they did to you, there's a reason for it, and this is going to lead you to process it. And we can't get the time back. But it's the one thing I would say, maybe to wrap this part up, is for me, thinking through these things leads me to poetry over and over and over. Write a poem to God. I know, God's not there, but just write a poem to God. Basically say, you were dead wrong. I don't owe you my life anymore. You stole from me. Write a letter to your pastors. Even if you're not addressing one particular pastor, write a letter to a pastor. Write a letter to your former self. Say, hey, FYI, you were being tricked when you were little. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I wish I could have helped you escape. Find some way, some kind of poem or letter or creative writing that helps you. It doesn't have to be clean, doesn't have to be nice and pretty, doesn't have to rhyme. Stream of consciousness will do a world of wonders for you. But let it out. Your voice is trying to get out. Give it a platform. Even if it's just you in front of the mirror, give yourself a platform. You'll be amazed at the healing that can occur. and the tears that can occur when you realize you have been holding in so stinking much for so long. So I wish you all well with that journey. It's a hard journey. My heart goes out to some of you that are like Helen, that are really hurting. Let's hope for better days ahead, and let's hope for lots of healing. Well, I'm going to just see if there's any final comments here. Looks like just one, unless anybody's typing. By the way, your comments on StreamYard take about a minute, maybe less, but 30 seconds to a minute to pop up. So if anyone's like doing a quick, hey, see you next time or something, I'm not ignoring you. A lot of them aren't going to come through in time unless you're, sending them a little earlier. But at the moment, the last one I see is Stephen saying, very well said on the anger issue. So thank you, Stephen. Appreciate your support. Well, we're almost at the hour, so I'm going to wrap up here. But again, if anyone has the bandwidth to come back tonight at 5 p.m. Eastern, I'll be back on. I'll have a few other things to say, and I'd love as well for your comments. I see some, but any comments you have about topics you want me to cover on this particular topic or others, feel free to add it as a comment or reach out somewhere else. But this is hopefully a discussion. These discussions can keep going. I want to be a healing piece of the puzzle for people. I really do. I don't want to just be like, I'm not here to just entertain. I'm not here to just bring people stories, although the stories can heal too, but I want to figure out ways that I and you and we all can speak to this and say, we all need a new community. We all need to build each other up. And there's so much pain, but there's also so much joy in knowing there's someone out there that understands and has my back. And they really are vested in my ability to heal and thrive. And that's what we want to say to each other. We're all really invested in each other's healing and thriving. So thank you all again for being part of this today. And I'll see some of you later today. And I'll also be on again several times Saturday, several times Sunday. So chime in when you can. And of course, you can always watch the replay later. Thank you again so much. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.